Hello, fellow Enthusiacs and other watchers. How are you? My name is Axalon, and I'm going to go ahead and talk about what I felt about Season 2 of The Walking Dead as a whole, as well as touch up on some things that I couldn't really put into words at the time I'd finished the season finale, um, which you can check out here on the Enthusiacs channel. I got the entire Walking Dead playlist. I do apologize in advance for the scratchy audio. The microphone I was using at the time was not as good as the one I'm using now, so I apologize for that. But if you just want to hear my thoughts on it, I suggest going to at least the season finale where I am using this microphone, and you can see what I did there and how that translates into what I'm doing here. Obviously, massive spoilers for season 1 and season 2 of The Walking Dead. In fact, just assume spoilers for a lot of things, because I might reference something offhand and without even realizing it's a spoiler. So, but I will try my absolute best to contain it all within the Walking Dead game. I won't even touch the TV shows, just Walking Dead video game. So I thought let's just start right off the bat. I've said my introduction. Let's just begin. Let's start off with what was great about season 2, because I loved season 1 of The Walking Dead, and I liked season 2. I'm saying again, I loved season 1 and I liked season 2. Although I loved the finale though for season 2. And I'll get into why I really loved season 1, but I didn't like season 2 all that much a bit later. But for now, let's just focus on what was great about season 2. It was, well, first off, Clementine. We got to see this character from the beginning. Right after we escape with Lee, we find her, we run into her, and we team up. She is a fantastic character. Melissa Hutchinson, the voice actress, incredible job, absolutely incredible. And then we get to see her grow under Lee's teaching, and we see obviously in season 1 she was still just a child, with a very childlike mindset. I mean, she was 8 years old. I mean, come on. So she made some mistakes, and it was up to us to uh, try to get her to think critically a bit more. And we see the results of this in season 2. Now that she's gone through so many hardships, especially us dying as Lee Everett. So seeing her grow, and since all these tragic events in her life have helped shape her. She, I mean, the tragedy has really made her grow up. It's like Batman, like Bruce Wayne, Clementine, same thing. That would be kind of awesome, actually. Anyway, getting off topic, seeing her grow since she left Lee behind was great. It was a nice continuation from the first season when we were Lee. And I say thank God that they continue this trend and do it mostly in a good way. Because this is Clementine, the character of Clementine and her development, I felt was something that has carried this season pretty much from beginning to end. If this were a completely, off the rails, brand new character, if we had been playing a Sarah or something instead of Clementine, I don't think I would care about this season half as much, to be totally truthful. Playing as Sarah or someone else. It's just, I wouldn't have cared as much. But I'll get into that later. So next up, again, obviously spoilers. Spoilers. Next up, we have Kenny. Kenny worked out very well here. I know some people did not. They didn't even like Kenny in the first season, so seeing him again here probably didn't help. And his story arc here was also kind of identical. Part of this is because they did mirror some of the events from season 1 a bit in season 2. With the whole Kenny losing his family and he feels bad about it, and he blames the main character for it. And there's a really cool survival character who is really efficient at killing zombies but is a loner, and there are lots of these mirror elements going on. But that's not to say though it works for the character, because Kenny at this point, I mean at this point in time, the player I feel should know how Kenny thinks, how he operates, and how to get along with him. I mean, his character is it's simple, but it just works. Like Kenny makes sense in a zombie apocalypse. So, some of the other characters in here do not make sense in a zombie apocalypse, and I'll get into them here in a bit. I have a fair piece to say about the other characters, but suffice to say, Kenny makes sense. What he goes through makes sense. And yeah, moving on, we have Luke. I liked Luke as well, even though in the end he didn't really end up doing anything. I just liked the character overall. He he is a naive, not completely naive, but he's a more innocent character than, well, Kenny. Um, he he wears his heart on his sleeve more, and I really thought they were building up to something with Luke. He kind of fell in the ice and died. But anyway, overall, I liked his character. I liked, voice work again. Like, voice work in The Walking Dead is pretty good. It's pretty good, just all around. Overall, voice work is pretty good. I liked Luke. Another thing I liked about season 2 was, believe it or not, episode 3. I know some people don't really care for episode 3, but I did, and let me explain why. Because for once, I appreciated the fact that for a good, I don't know, 95% of the episode, we're in one location. And let me further clarify, like, throughout the rest of the season, episode 1, 2, 4, and 5, it's mostly, well, 4 to a degree, but definitely 1, 3, and 5. We're just constantly just moving, just one place. We get to one place, we set up, and then we move again, then we move again. Like Clementine starts off, she's at some like public restroom or something, and then Omid dies, and then we're whisked away to 2 years later, and suddenly, Krista gets attacked, and now we're running away. Now we're swept down a river, and that river is like really pretty much represents what I feel was like the pace for season 2, and it was just we're just rushing along, and we're just being carried over to all these places at a brisk pace. And season 3, episode 3 was just we just stopped. Here we are. We're in a camp. It sucks. We're in prison, yes, but here everyone's in one place, and we're eventually trying to get out, obviously, because this guy's Carver is crazy. But here we can stop and just take a breath. And that I liked that. And episode 4 did continue that, where we eventually found a location. We just stopped, we just took a breath, and we could just keep going. Once we had finished our business. Yeah, but overall, I mean that's what I thought was pretty good about season 2. Not to say it's not the only good thing. That's just what I could think of when I was just taking some notes. So now let's move on to what was okay. Now, your mileage may vary here. You may think this was actually pretty well executed, or you may think the points I'm about to bring up are absolutely horrible, and that's okay, because this is all just opinions here. Okay, so for my first okay thought, Carver. Carver was built up over the first 2 episodes like he's the bad guy. Every time one of the cabin characters would talk about him, he's like, "Oh, it's Carver," and you got this really ominous sense of dread. And then he visits you, but you don't know exactly who it is yet. But he comes to the house when only you and Sarah are there, and he looks menacing, and he's walking around, and then he's got that creepy little smile, and he finds Sarah's picture, and he's like, "Oh, who's this little girl? You don't know who these people are, do you?" "I know, because I've been hunting them." It was, and then he dies to a brutal beatdown by Kenny, and like that's it. Like that's it. I mean, he's done. I mean, he was getting comparisons to like the governor from the TV show, and then he just didn't live up. He was just an evil guy, looking out for Darwinism and all that, and he got killed. And then we spend the next two episodes just kind of floating around. I think Carver could have been used way more effectively. He he could have been some kind of goal or guidance to get away from. Uh, or on the flip side, maybe present him as slightly less crazy and more just like a really, really, really pragmatic guy. More pragmatic than say even Kenny or Jane, and you know actually make his viewpoint compelling. Obviously, you would have to rewrite things a bit, but I think this character had potential, and potential that was just never fully realized. So that was Carver. I mean, when all is said and done, he's mentioned in the first episode. You meet him in the second one. You spend half of that trying to just get away from Carver and his forces, and then he captures you at the very end. And then you spend all of episode 3 under his thumb, and then he dies. That's that. So moving on to my next point, we have uh, the other characters and their inputs on Kenny. Like usually they'll pull you aside and say, "Hey Clem, I think Kenny is off the rails. I think Kenny's unstable," and they have a point. Kenny's obviously going through a low point in his life. However, they also don't have the same perspective that Clementine does. And I say this because the people like Bonnie, who have known Kenny for 2 days, they don't know this guy. Like in those 2 days that they've known him, he had an eye punched out basically, and he lost his wife or girlfriend or whatever Sarita was to him, his significant other, lost that too. Potentially due to Clementine cutting her hand off and getting turned into zombie food, or potentially just because she got bitten. But that it was another big loss for Kenny, and he took it, about as reasonably as I expected. I don't like that he blamed Clementine, even if you didn't chop her arm off. But I partly attribute that to lazy writing because it's a game, so eventually you're gonna have to go to the same narrative points, basically. And part because it's also what Kenny does. Like he lashed out at Lee just because he's upset and he can't do anything. But Kenny does apologize later, unless you antagonize him, which I'll get into that later. But yeah, I mean, like other characters and their input, like other than oh wow, he looks really pissed off. Like they really don't know him. Like they don't have the same experience that we do, having played season 1. Now, obviously, Kenny is a polarizing character. He was about half and half. Or at least I'm just spouting out a number there, half and half. But Kenny was a polarizing character. He was well. It all depends on how you interacted with him. In season 1, he was either your best buddy or one of your worst enemies. Because Kenny, like he's very family oriented, and if you do something that could potentially endanger his family, he will flip. That's just what he does. He did it in season 1, and we've seen him at his lows and at his highs. And so far, all Mike and Bonnie and all of them, they've only ever seen Kenny really at his lower points. So I took their advice with a grain of salt. I loved that Telltale gave me the option to say, hey, it's okay, I've seen Kenny like this before. But it is what it is. Again, this goes back to I think by now players should realize how to treat Kenny. I mean, I said it in my walkthrough. Kenny needs positive encouragement. If you do that, if you do that, and you support him, you will be glad to have him on your side. So this brings me to actually, well, whatever. It's the next point I have was the darker tone and the darker atmosphere for season two. Now I'm a fan of darker atmospheres. I don't mind grim dark atmospheres, but there's got to be a little give and take here. Having completely dark and depressing. Well, as I say complete, it wasn't completely dark, but it was easily the majority. Having this dark depression can only take you so far. You got to have a little give and take. Having lighter moments can really help you emphasize a darker scene later on down the road, and makes darkness stand out even more when you have something light to contrast it with. Take for example, the St. John Dairy from season one, the one with the cannibals. So now, if you were a genre savvy player, you probably realized instantly this place looks way too good to be true. From the beginning, this is way too good to be true. Something's wrong. But for those who were like fully swept up and immersed in the adventure, you see this nice place, and you're like, oh, thank God. It looks like a secure place. They've got food. They've got food. Great. They've got a fence, an electric fence. It's fantastic. And then, like, you start peeling back the layers of the St. John Dairy, and you see just how twisted and evil these people are. And that makes that darkness just stand out so much against the bright and cheery paint and sunshine of how we initially see the dairy. And one of the good things is, as the darkness gets revealed in the game, the sun starts disappearing. Eventually, it's a full-fledged thunderstorm going on. That's when all bets are off. Now you know exactly what these people are and what they do, and it just really stood. That's why it's still one of my favorite episodes in all of The Walking Dead. Season 1 or season 2 was the second episode. It was fantastic. And then there's the other things, but that's a season 1 thing. I will not dwell on it too much. Let's move on. So speaking of lighter segments, we have like the raccoon segment in episode 4. There was no life or death situation or anything. It was just, hey, there's a raccoon. Let's try and catch it. You got Mike saying he's all, oh, I would eat the shit out of that raccoon. And, that was that. It was a nice little break. I liked it. It was a nice little break from all the tedium of seriousness that season 2 was just throwing at me. And by lighter moments, I also don't mean unintentionally funny moments, like Arvo. Like this guy, Arvo sounds he sounds like half Russian and half Cowardly Lion. It just sounded so funny. If I'm offending anyone, I sincerely apologize. But that's just what it sounded like to me. It sounded like he was really like rolling his R's. I was like, you're kind of like the Cowardly Lion. That's what you sound like. I don't mean unintentionally funny because it's unintentional and whatever. It is what it is. So that was my piece on everything that was good and okay about season 2. So now let's go ahead and talk, and I'll probably receive some hate for this, but that's okay. I have my flameproof vest on. Let's rock. Let's talk about what I did not like about season 2 and what I thought actually hurt season 2 a bit and prevented it from becoming even better. Now again, disclaimer, I liked season 2. But I just liked it. I didn't love it like I loved season 1. And just to kind of start from where I started off with a good start, Clementine. Now, put your pitchforks down. Hang on, hang on. Yes, Clementine is growing up. You know, she's becoming hardened to the horrors that is the zombie apocalypse. But at the same time, sometimes she was also the only adult in a group of adults, and she's 11 years old. That I did not really care for. Like in episode 2, when the wind turbine is going out of control, and so it's like, oh my god, it's going to attract like a horde of walkers. We need to shut it off. Why do you trust the 11-year-old to shut off the wind turbine, especially when it was literally just pick up key, turn key, and that was it. Like I get Clementine as the main character, but some tasks are just like she was always doing things that adults didn't really seem to do. Like there were a few characters who let her do less important tasks instead of trying to throw all the responsibility on her. Like when we first meet Kenny, he says, "Hey Clem, why don't you go help what's his face with cooking dinner?" And I was like, "Yeah, that is a logical task that makes sense, for a kid to help with. Let's just help make dinner." Or Carver, let's go back to Carver. When he had Sarah and Clem and he decided to assign them a task, it wasn't like, "Hey, Clementine, go out and help build the fence against the walkers." No. No, Lee would have been building the fence against the walkers. Clementine it was just, "Hey, you see these plants here? Take the berries, put them in this little basket here, and then if you see any dead branches, just trim them off." Obviously, Sarah couldn't even complete this trivial task, but it was a task that a child can do. And Carver, Carver's insane, but he's not that insane. Like it was a task the girls could accomplish. It wasn't, particularly labor intensive or even dangerous. It was just, berries, cut off dead branches. That was it. That was it. But yeah, Clementine's age was both a good and a bad thing. It was good because we got to see her grow as a character, but it was bad because, well, sometimes we would just be taking a little too much responsibility for what I felt was plausible. We would get blamed for things that weren't our fault or were out of our control, and none of the adults ever came into conflict as much as with Clementine. At least that's what it felt like. Let's see. What else do I have here? Right. I talked about it briefly, but there's no real direction to the season, and a part of this is because the group and Clementine, like they had no goal they were going for it, but besides survival. And when it come like they had the Carver plot, but we saw how that ended. And then we had Krista saying, "Well, let's go to Wellington." But that gets brought up every now and then. Like it gets brought up at the start, and then when we meet Kenny, he brings it up. But then that all gets sidetracked by Carver, and then in the end we try to make it back to Wellington while also taking care of a baby. And I don't know, it felt less focused than season 1 did. Uh, and speaking of less focused, I mean, if I had been told that at the end of the season I would have to choose between killing or saving Kenny, or killing and saving some character that was introduced halfway through the season, I would have said no way. There is no way they would make up a character halfway through and say you must choose between this person and Kenny. But that's what they did. That's what they did. And there was barely any setup for it for the particular character that was set up in opposition to Kenny. I'll get into that here in a bit, because this leads me to my next point, which is unlikable characters. And this applies to most of the season 2 cast, give or take a couple of characters. It ties in because the quicker pace of the season, it just gives us less time to get to know these people. So when they die, you're just like, I barely knew you anyway, guy. Sorry, it sucks. Zombies are eating you now, but whatever. And yeah, because you're just less attached to a lot of these characters. So you just, they died. Oh, Sarah. Oh no, Sarah died. Or but really, this ties. I mean, obviously, your mileage may vary, between how much a character was liked or disliked. But really, this goes into my next point, and they both lead up to the same point, which is the illusion of choice. The illusion of choice. Now, I understand that this is a video game, and because it's a video game, it has a budget, and there's limited resources, and there's a timeline and a deadline. And I realize that Season 1 also had illusion of choice. But the illusion for Season 2, the illusion of choice in Season 2 was thinner this time around. You could see through it a bit more often. And I attribute part of this to the fact that I could see the formula. Like I could see it became like kind of predictable. Like for instance, every time in The Walking Dead, as soon as you see a character where you can determine if they live or die, that person is immediately marked as a dead man walking. Immediately. It happened with Carly and Doug in Season 1. It happened with Ben. It happens with Nick, with Sarah. Actually, let's go to Sarah. Sarah's where illusion of choice, I think, or Sarah and Nick. Sarah and Nick are the two biggest illusion of choice, where the illusion just shattered. So Nick, Nick kills a guy on a bridge, and then later on we get to the ski lodge where Kenny is, and one of Kenny's friends there, Walter, that's what his name, Walter, who he helped with dinner. Walter, turns out, was good friends with the guy who Nick shot. And later on, he finds out, well, he overhears, us talking about how they shot someone, and then, he eventually finds that we have his friend's knife, which he gave to him and has his initials carved into it. It's in our possession, so he puts two and two together and realizes that these people have killed my friend. And, depending on your actions, he will either not save Nick when a walker is trying to eat him, or he will save him. And that's great. You're like, oh yeah, I get to decide who lives and who dies. Ha 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 ha. But if he lives in episode 3, he has like maybe like one line, and like he's like sleeping for half the episode, or he's just called off screen to do some kind of job for Carver or Tavia or whoever, and that's it. And then he dies in episode 4, and we have to hack his face off. And it's like that's what I mean by dead man walking. It's the illusion of choice, and once you see a character can die, it's pretty much assured that because of all these constraints, which I talked about before, with budget and deadlines, because of all these constraints, it's like it's going to railroad your decisions to the same eventual outcome. Sarah, again, great example. After she runs off when her father gets killed, we have the option to save her or let her die. If we save her, she continues with us back to the camp we've set up, and eventually the deck collapses and she falls and she gets pinned down and she gets eaten by zombies or walkers or whatever. And to top it all off, most of the characters, like her presence, her death is not even acknowledged for the most part. It's just, oh no, you couldn't save her, and that's it. Like we don't even get to see like Walker Sarah, who's been pinned down under the debris. In a futile attempt to crawl out and eat us. None of that. It's just, she's dead, and the characters don't seem to care. And the characters don't care because this is a character who's marked for death, and then the story must move on. Okay, that's what I was feeling. And if she does die earlier on, when we just leave her behind, like Luke will talk about it and be like, "Oh man, I'm such a coward," and he blames himself, and that's it. Like Rebecca cries a bit when she hears the news that Nick and or Sarah have been killed. But that's it. We don't mention Sarah again. And this goes back to the unlikable characters and the pacing because we just can't relate to these people because we're constantly moving. Characters are dying, and after a while, like the formula, you just start seeing it's like, oh look, this character is probably going to die. Oh, that character died. Oh, now I get to choose. Oh, this character is probably going to die a horrible death later on. And it's different from like Larry, who is going to die anyway in that meat locker, regardless. Because I mean, because it looks like you have the chance to save Larry, but you don't at all. Like regardless, like Kenny's gonna come down and make him very salty about life, and that's that. Like, 'cause there is no real decision there. Which brings me to this continuation of characters and what is going on. Arvo. Arvo is a piece of shit. End of story. Okay. I'll go into further detail with Arvo. I don't understand what was going on with this character. I chose not to rob him. So, and I told Luke I did not rob him, and Luke was like, "Oh, okay." So later on, Arvo and his little group ambush us, claiming that I robbed him. And I'm like, well, this is obviously a lie. And they try to say that, oh, Jane still took his gun, even though he came back with a bag full of all that medication, all the syringes and all that. So I mean, like, whoa, really, guy? Like, really? And then the whole shootout thing happens, which I'm amazed no one died in that shootout, because our pistols against these guys with shotguns and assault rifles. Somehow Mike gets shot in the arm, and Luke gets shot in the leg, and that's it. Like we don't even get hurt aside from that. But we kill all of them except for Arvo. And so Kenny starts taking out his frustration on Arvo, and everyone else tells him to back off. And then Arvo is all like, "Well, no, I have a house and there's some food. I can lead you to it." And so they tell Kenny to lay off, so because we need food and shelter. So that's understandable. So he leads us to his place. Luke dies along the way, and then Kenny blames him for Luke dying because he ran off out on the ice. Really, I mean, I personally don't think it was Arvo's fault. But at the same time, I do kind of question the writing in general, because I really think they could have just gone around. It would have taken them maybe an hour or two, depending on the size of this giant lake. But they could have either they could have found a way. They say there's no way around, but it's a lake. They could have found a way around. It would have taken them a bit longer, or at the very least found something that looked like it was more stable ice-wise, or more shallow. But yeah, Arvo. He's suddenly accepted by the group. Like Mike feels bad towards him, and he's like he feels sympathy for him, and then it leads up to this strange moment where Mike and Bonnie decide to run off. They free Arvo and they decide to run off with all our food and the car that Kenny fixed. And it's like, really? Like, why do you trust this guy? Like, this guy, he has not apologized or explained himself for the ambush where him and his gang tried to murder all of us. I get that you feel bad for him because Kenny's, beating his face in. I get it. I get it, Mike. I do. I get it, Mike. But at the same time, it's like, this guy has not explained himself. Why are you taking his side? If you don't like Kenny, fine, but Kenny never ambushed you in the middle of winter and tried to rob and murder you. Now, I've heard some people say, well, Arvo wasn't the one actually shooting at us, or it was Arvo's group, it wasn't him. But he never explains this. I mean, he was clearly acting as the bait, so his group could surround you. I mean, like, why do you trust this guy? That entire segment made no sense. It makes even less sense if you're not an asshole to him. Like, if you try to get Kenny to stop, beating him all the time, if you don't rob him, if you, try to cheer him up with some of that rum from earlier on, it doesn't matter. He just shoots you anyway. It's like, I get it, you're an asshole, but at the same time, it comes out of nowhere if you're nice to him. I was an asshole to him. I didn't rob him, but after he ambushed us, I let Kenny do what he wanted with him. I was just whatever. So it felt kind of okay when he shot me. I was like, whatever. And then apparently, like, that was his sister, and earlier who Clementine shot, even though she was already dead and was a walker, but he was angry at us. Whatever. Piece of shit character. Moving on. So the big issue is Kenny and Jane. And I don't think that conflict should have happened at all. I think it should have been Kenny and Luke. Like, they've been setting, it seems like they've been setting this up from the beginning. Like, first of all, going back to what I was saying, is like, if you had told me that the season would have ended with a character introduced halfway through and Kenny, I'd be like, no. Like, Luke makes more sense because he's been there since the first one. He's saved us, and he's a nice alternative to Kenny. Like, each character, Kenny and Luke, they represent humanity in a different way. Like, Kenny deep down, for those of you who sided with Kenny in the whole Kenny versus Jane struggle, Kenny deep down, if for whatever reason you hadn't learned what he was about by now, the ending really reveals it. Kenny, he cares about family. Like, he will do whatever it takes for family, including be extremely freaking violent about it. He pulls no punches. Kenny pulls no punches in this. But Luke's flat out tells you family is also the most important thing. But the way he goes about it is a bit different. Luke wears his heart on his sleeve. And he's a bit more naive and innocent in the ways of the world. Take, for example, Carver's death. If we had not killed Carver, odds are that once he and his group dealt with the herd of walkers that was attacking the store, he would have started chasing after us, our group, again for revenge. He's already chased us down once. That's what all of episode 1 and 2 was about, was Carver tracking us down, for miles and just chasing us down. So obviously he's even more pissed off now. He's going to do it again. And so it made sense. We have to kill him. It's the same reasoning for why I chose to kill the St. John brothers. It's like, why would we leave one alive when we have destroyed his security, taken away his ability to sustain himself with his food, and killed his mother and brother, his family? Like, why would you leave someone like that out there? Same reasoning for Carver. And they even played up the whole Kenny and Luke thing with that silly little cafeteria scene, where you have to pick which table you're going to sit at. It's like, really, you feel like you're in school again. You're just like, oh, it's like, oh no, I'm gonna ostracize someone. But yeah, so so the reason I think Jane doesn't work as well is because they're both, her and Kenny are both pragmatic survivors. And I think they tried to work it so that it was more of an issue of like trust, like who do you trust more? But if you're looking at it from less of a trusting issue and more of, well, if you look at it as a combined like trusting and survival issue, I mean, they're kind of the same. Whereas Kenny and Luke, it's a more clear-cut difference between the two. While Kenny is more violent in his ways, like they both care about the same thing, but they just have a different approach. It was like humanity versus practicality. And the reason I don't think it's worked with Jane is because, again, they're both practical people, and because Jane's plan made no sense. So let me explain. So Jane is a loner. She's pragmatic. She's a survivalist. So suddenly, because while her and Clementine are driving this truck, and then suddenly we get in this wreck because of all the ice and the snow. Kenny had already left earlier to look for some diesel for the truck. Suddenly, because we crashed into the walker, because I messed up the QuickTime event. So there's this walker like reaching through the windshield trying to eat us. She takes off, and she takes AJ the baby with her, and she decides that this is the perfect opportunity to abandon Clementine in a blizzard after the crash. Well, I say abandoned because she kind of stuck around. I mean, there were walkers chasing after her, but she kind of stuck around just in time to see a walker grab our foot, and then she took off. And she decided this is a perfect time to hide the baby somewhere in a different car. Hope it doesn't cry loudly enough for walkers to come around and smash in and eat the baby. Hope that Clementine survives the walkers in her immediate area, as well as survive the harsh blizzard that's currently going on. All to make a point to her about how if you punch someone in the feels, they might not be too happy about it. Like, that is an insane plan. Like I don't get it. Like it seems so contradictory to what we know of Jane or Molly 2.0. It's like you seem like a fairly practical, down-to-earth person, then you pull this crazy stunt. Like this is the worst possible time. Like I don't get it. And some people have said, oh, well, Kenny is unstable. Yes, I agree. Kenny is a bit unstable. Clementine doesn't... Again, this goes back to players should already know what Kenny is like by now after 10 episodes. Clementine should not need this dramatic demonstration to know this. But here we are, and she's pulling this crazy thing. It's like, oh, I know you care about this baby like it was your own family. Oops, it was an accident. It died. It's like she was deliberately looking just shady enough while denying that she murdered it. Instead of saying it was an accident to rile him up. It's like obviously if you push someone's berserk button, they're going to go berserk. Like Lee would have done the exact same thing. If Ben or Larry had walked up in season 1 and said, "Oh my God, Lee, I'm so sorry. There were walkers everywhere. Clementine is dead. She's gone." Lee would have flipped his shit. Like Lee, no, like you, it would be like a reverse situation for when like Lee and what's his face were holding Kenny back from killing a bit. Like Kenny would actually probably like Carly or someone would be holding Lee back, trying not to rip Larry's eyes out, and before people chime in with, well, you know, Lee's personality is dependent. Well, yes, Lee's personality does change depending on how you play him. But one thing consistent is that he will fight to the death for Clementine. And seeing someone like Ben, who has abandoned Clementine once before in the past, seeing him come up and say, "Oh my God, it was an accident. I'm so sorry." Like Lee would have done the exact same thing that Kenny did in that situation. I mean, you guys could see my playthrough. I mean, I was pretty incredulous myself that I was even given this choice in the first place. Like Kenny and Jane, really. Um, Truth be told, I say Kenny and Luke would have been better simply because they represent the same thing but from opposite sides of the spectrum. I'm not sure how exactly that would work. I would hope it. I really hope that originally it wasn't Kenny versus Luke, but with the whole baby hiding scenario. Like, that I think that's dumb. I'd be hoping for a better confrontation myself for some reason if they actually had to confront each other. Um, but yeah, like it just really felt odd of this crazy plan all of a sudden. I mean, I guess you could rationalize it by saying, Jane is in her own way just as crazy as Kenny, but it's still, I mean, personally, I rationalize it as she's pretty much what I just said. Like she is in her own way just as crazy as Kenny. Um, that's really all there is. I mean, who else but a crazy person would do a plan like that? And even if assuming the worst, um, like assume that Jane gets killed, and it's just Kenny and Clementine. Suppose the baby was just decided to sleep instead of crying. They would never have found the baby, and those two would have just kept walking to Wellington or wherever. It's like, come on. Like this plan makes no sense. It's stupid. It's totally out of character for the character of Jane, unless she was supposed to have been going crazy at that moment. I don't know. I don't know. Oh, and one more thing. With like 400 days, completely worthless. Completely worthless. The only thing it set up was a bit of backstory for Bonnie. Bonnie. And then everyone else had some blink and you miss it cameos if you got them to all go with Tavia, which is what I did. Um, yeah, all it did was set up a backstory for a determinate character. Determinate characters, is where you decide if a person can live or die. It set up a backstory for a person who could have died. Who, it's like what I would have done with 400 days was maybe set up Carver a bit more, and use that to help, plan for season 2. Because in the end, that's what 400 days is about. Because Tavia, we find out, works for Carver, and Carver's like recruiting people into his group. Like that would have been the time to set up Carver. Maybe even like what was it earlier, make him seem compelling and even a bit sympathetic. Because zombie apocalypse, end of the world. I'm not saying make him a good guy, but you know, try to explore both sides of the coin and really set up a good antagonist for Clem to run into with Luke or with Kenny or whoever. But as is 400 days, eh. Like there's no other point besides getting to know a bit about Bonnie. I don't know. Like I said, that's my piece on The Walking Dead season 2, as well as 400 Days. Come to think of it, I liked it overall. There were several moments where it was just they can basically be described as what the fuck. But I mean, the finale, the different finales, the different endings for the finale of season 2, episode 5, really helped make up for a lot of the shortcomings of this season. Because really, I think the tagline was, at least for me, for season 2 was like, it could have been better, but, comma. You know, and it was just so many little things that dragged it down. I'm not saying season 1 was perfect by any means, but, you know, it was just so, the problems were just more visible in season 2 rather. They were more visible in season 2 than they were in season 1. Yeah, like, that's pretty much all I have to say about it. Like, I like season 2. I hope season 3 is better. Oh, the Lee. I forgot to tack this onto the good parts. Lee. The scene with Lee was absolutely amazing. The fact that it was Lee, who was one of my favorite main characters in gaming for a long time. The fact that Lee was there, even if it was a dream, and the fact that we could get a very short but customized pep talk from Lee. Like, our own customized pep talk from Lee Everett, you know, the main character of season 1. That was fantastic. I love that scene. Telltale did a great job of that scene. The Kenny endings I felt were also pretty good. You know, Kenny has his flaws. He's got a huge temper. He doesn't like when people disagree with him. But you know, you see Kenny's ending, and you see deep down how much he's willing to sacrifice for the well-being of Clementine, and it's just like, oh, Kenny, that just hits you right there. Yeah, there were several, you know, really good moments, and it's just like, if only they had just polished it up a bit more, this could have been so much better. Like I said, I liked it, but it could have been so much better. As it was decent. But yeah, that's what I think about season 2 of The Walking Dead. Thank you guys very much for watching. If you agree with what I've said here, don't forget to drop a like, a comment, and a subscribe. If you disagree, by all means, please, you know, write something in the comments. I'll be more than willing to have a conversation with you about, you know, why you think I'm wrong or why I think you're wrong for X or Y reason, and you know, I'm more than willing to do that for you guys. Or if you'd rather not, you know, leave a YouTube comment, swing by our main site, Enthusiacs.com. Drop by our forums. We have a Walking Dead forum thread over there. You can, you know, spoilers are allowed. You can bash me, you can praise me, whatever. I don't care. You know, what do you guys think about season 2 of The Walking Dead? I would absolutely love to know. Thanks again, guys. This is Axalon. I will see you guys in the next playthrough. Have a good one.